Hi friends, my name is Emily and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be filming a very quick September wrap-up, so let's jump right into the books. The first few books here are from the Day of Dahl vlog, and I'm not going to go into them in any depth because I already did that in that video, and I will link that video in the cards. So I read The Magic Finger by Roald Dahl. This is about a girl with a magic finger who uses her magic finger to change her hunting-loving neighbors, the Gregs, into ducks, and they really learn to appreciate what exactly they're doing when they kill animals for sport. I read The Giraffe and the Pelly and Me, which is a silly little nonsense book about a boy who meets these three animals who have started a ladder-free window washing thing, and they end up cleaning the windows for a duke. I read The Twits, which are about two horrible people who are ugly on the outside because of how ugly they are on the inside. And the last here is George's Marvelous Medicine, which is about a boy with a terrible, terrible grandmother who mixes together various substances from all over the house, the kitchen, the bathroom, the garage, the animal shed, all that jazz, into a medicine that causes his grandmother to grow really tall, and then when they try and reproduce it, they create a medicine that causes grandma to shrink. The next book that I think is actually worth talking about quite a bit, I did so in a video, I think I called it What I Learned. It's like the follow-up to The Day of Dahl. I will link that as well. That is The Witches. So The Witches is a lot darker than I expected. It's about a boy whose parents die, who is then taken into the care of his grandmother. His grandmother is from Norway and she knows all of this like folklore about witches and how to protect yourself from witches. The boy and his grandmother go on vacation and they are staying at a hotel, and boy ends up sitting in a room where a witch conference happens. He gets to see all of the signs of witches and know that his grandmother's knowledge is real, and then the witches turn him into a mouse and stuff goes on from there. This was really dark, and I am working right now on finishing Matilda, which is a book that I started during the Day of Dahl, and I want to compare women with power in two different books. And already I'm seeing a difference between how women with power are represented in The Witches compared to Matilda. So I think that's going to be really interesting, and I'm having a lot of fun working on it, so I hope you guys are looking forward to it. The next book I read was The Fate of Fausto by Oliver Jeffers. This is the fable about a man who believes he owns everything, including the ocean. His foolishness is his downfall. I love Jeffers' illustrations. He is my favorite children's book author and illustrator. He's a classically trained artist and his works are beautiful. If you haven't followed him on Instagram, or if you haven't checked out his Instagram page, it is worth it. Like, you see so many of his pieces and like the other things that he's working on other than books. It's fantastic. So I really, really enjoyed The Fate of Fausto. It was a fun little read. It was great to look at all of the different art. If you have a little person in your life or you are interested in children's literature, I would recommend that you pick that up. The next book I read was for a book club, and it is terrible. That is I Prefer Girls by Jessie Dumont. So this is a piece of 1950s pulp lesbian fiction about a terrible, terrible woman. Her name is Penny Stewart, and she is abusive to her partner. She cheats on her partner. She's the most narcissistic asshole. It's almost to the point of like it parodying the genre. This was terrible. This was laughably bad, but I read it for a book club. I would not recommend that you pick this up. But to go alongside that, I read Stone Butch Blues by Leslie Feinberg, which is a horribly depressing, more accurate account of life as a butch lesbian in the 1950s. So it looks a lot at bar culture, it looks at the butch femme dynamic and the policing around that. It speaks a lot to the police brutality. Butch women were taken into prison and then often sexually assaulted. The main character in Stone Butch Blues, we follow her from the 50s to the 80s and her journey, and it's just absolutely depressing. We see her working in factories and being discriminated against, being a real support of the union and like getting lesbian women represented in the union and in on conversations. We see her eventually being so distraught about being pegged as a butch woman and feeling so unsafe that she starts to take testosterone. Once she starts to pass as a man, she loses her community in queer bar culture because like she's not perceived as a woman anymore. Femme lesbians don't want to date her, but she still identifies as a lesbian even though she's passing as a man. And then eventually she decides to stop taking the testosterone, but it's sort of changed her body in unexpected ways, and she is very lost and unanchored throughout it. It is an incredibly eye-opening read, and it is heavy, but it is a really important piece of queer history and queer fiction, and if you are mentally prepared to take on that reading, I would highly recommend it. The next book that I read is for my October project that I am working on getting videos together for. Should start in a little bit, and that book is The Fantastic: A Structural Approach to a Literary Genre by Tzvetzan Todorov. So this looks at the genre of the fantastic, including horror, if that gives you a little sneaky peek into what I'm thinking of for this October project. It was something that I looked at during my MA dissertation, but I was much more interested in fantasy literature than in horror, so this was a reread and a revisit for me, but helpful nonetheless. This is not a book that I would recommend that you pick up if you are interested in the genre. Unless you are used to like heavy academic writing, I would not go near this to learn about fantasy literature because it is very dry and it is very, like, it almost feels unnecessarily elevated in its word choice. Like somebody, either in translation, because this is translated from French to English, somebody in translation was like, how can we make Todorov sound like the smartest smarty pants, like mustache twirl, finger tensing, kind of smarty pants academic sitting behind a desk with his pipe. It is a slog to get through, but it's one of those foundational texts that all contemporary scholars need to engage with, just because of how foundational this is to that body of scholarship. So it was good, and if you are interested in it and you are prepared to read academic texts on the sort of genesis and like family tree of fantastic literature, then I would recommend this. The follow-up to that is Fantasy: The Literature of Subversion by Rosemary Jackson. This is again another heavy academic text. This is a text in which Jackson speaks back to Todorov, and she is looking at his approach and critiquing it, and she's taking it in her own direction and looking at the ways in which fantasy literature has a lot of potential for subversion from social roles, social norms. Because of the established rules of fantasy literature, you sort of just have to follow your own internally consistent rules. Your secondary world can be as bonkers as you want, provided they are logical within the space of that world and you don't break them. So in that way, fantasy has a lot of potential to play with gender and race and social structures, all that jazz, right? So we can really push boundaries and sort of do thought experiments with fantasy literature. Again, this text is a little unnecessarily academic, but I feel like this one is more accessible than Todorov. I wouldn't say don't read this one, but again, know that it's not going to be a fun, easy read either. The next book that I read, I actually have a review for, and I will link that above as well, and that is The Institute by Stephen King. I so enjoyed my time with The Institute. Quick plot synopsis: a boy named Luke is abducted from his house and he is taken to this institute that is all children, where they are tested and abused by adults, doctors, medical professionals, and the thing that all of these children have in common are telekinetic or telepathic abilities. Luke is sort of a catalyst figure for change within this space. I don't think that's a spoiler to say that our protagonist is not just gonna like fall in and become another cog in the machine, right? I feel like Stephen King really excels at groups of child characters. The thing that I love the most about it is that close-knit group of children. The best part about The Body are the close-knit group of the children, right? Like that young, silly, experimental friendship group that just sort of loves wholly and unconditionally and supports each other in so many different ways. I think King is really great at, first of all, writing character pieces, but then also especially child character pieces. I especially enjoyed the Luke Avery relationship. They developed a sort of brother relationship, and it was really endearing, I guess, to see these kids work together and to form a little family in this really scary place. I enjoyed the ending because I find a lot of the times with these Stephen King books, I've bought in, I'm with it, and then in like the last 20 pages, something happens that pushes my understanding of the world a little too far, and then that's it. Like, it's ruined an otherwise perfect or near perfect reading experience for me when that supernatural goes too far. I don't think the supernatural goes too far here. And I have to say that I think for me personally, this is probably in my top 5 Kings from the last decade, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like there's been a lot of mixed feelings around the books that King has produced in the last decade. If you are looking to get into Stephen King, I feel like this is okay. This is sort of actually going back to his roots, I think, because he started with Carrie, which is about a girl with telekinetic abilities. So more on that in a minute. The next book that I finished, I had to return to work, but that is Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs by Doughty. So she is a mortician here on YouTube, death positive, funeral director, and she makes really great educational videos. And so this book was taking real questions from real organic free-range children and answering them. Questions like, will my cat eat my eyeballs? What happens to an astronaut that dies in space? Can you be too big for a coffin? Why do bodies turn different colors? Can I be buried alive? There were so many questions and it was so good. The illustrations in it are great. I wish I had taken some pictures of the illustrations before I returned it. There were little very stylized illustrations throughout that were excellent. They were all little short chapters addressing questions from children. Even as an adult, it was great to hear the answers to some of these questions. Like, some of them I was already familiar with. I'm vaguely interested in death. We could say that. So I have either researched it or encountered it in Caitlin's videos or the other Deathlings videos, the whole Deathling community. There are several morticians and historians that are interested in death that are on YouTube. I've encountered some of them before, but a lot of it was also new, or it was something that I hadn't thought about before. So I would definitely recommend that you pick it up. I do think it is appropriate to read with children. I'm trying to think what age range. I think 6 to 8 might be too young, unless maybe that child has experienced some death in the family and is asking questions. Then it might be a good idea to sit down and read that together to make death less scary. But I think a 9 to 12-year-old could definitely sit down with this book by themselves. I think they would be okay. I think all of the answers are really comforting, and Caitlin interjects humor into all of it, so I think you could actually give this to young people, because these are questions that young people are asking to begin with, right? I would recommend it, even if you're an adult and you have questions about death. It was really good. The last thing I wanted to mention before we go is that the Red Rum Book Club has started. We are reading Carrie. There will be a live show at the end of the month for patrons. So the Red Rum Book Club is a patron exclusive book club. For as little as $1 a month, you can become a patron, get access to the private Discord where we are chatting about Carrie. I'm giving us to the end of October to read this. If you are a patron, do keep an eye out for a poll. It should go up in the next week to sort of determine where we are in the world in terms of time zones and like when works for a live show. I'm gonna put up a couple of dates, so make sure you look for that in the next week and vote so that we can book that date for our live show of Carrie. I'm not finished Carrie yet. I'm trying to take my time and like really enjoy, really take notes. But I will say it's very interesting to come off reading The Institute and go back to King's first published novel. So to go from his most recently published work to this, probably worth talking about in the discussion. If you're interested in reading along with us, it's obviously still open. Links for the patron page are always in the description box. Speaking of my patrons, we need to thank them before we go. Thank you, patrons, for making videos like this and long-form projects possible. I really appreciate the work that you are enabling me to do. If you are interested in becoming a patron, having access to the Red Rum Book Club, early access to videos, all of that jazz will be linked in the description box down below. That that really brings me to the end of this video. Chat with me in the comments down below. I do really look forward to reading your comments. I know it usually takes me a while to respond to comments, but it's always really great to see people engaging with the videos. I love it. So thank you guys so much for your comments. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye.